Just a note that this podcast may touch on difficult themes and include some challenging conversations, so please take care when listening. This is The Widow Diaries, a podcast that holds space for the often unspoken stories of grief, love, and life after loss as a young widow. I'm Caroline Winter, and like so many, I've been on this journey. So come with me each episode and hear from others who've also walked the winding path of widowhood in their own way. The Widow Diaries, for First Light Widowed support, where no story is the same and every story matters. There's something uniquely disorientating about losing your person at the very moment life is about to expand. That could be in many ways. Maybe there's a baby on the way, or a new home, or like me, a new role at work, something that you've worked towards for years. And then suddenly everything shifts. That next chapter looks nothing like you've imagined. Grief doesn't wait for the right time, as we know. It arrives when it arrives, and it can feel like the ground has been pulled out from below. For Cass Barrie, her husband died when she was 30 weeks pregnant with their son, a moment when joy and heartbreak collided. In the months that followed, she would face more loss, more upheaval, and the slow process of rebuilding a life that she never expected to be living. Today, Cass is a counsellor and an empowerment mentor who uses her own journey to help others through theirs, offering support, perspective, and, as you'll hear in this episode, a good dose of laughter. Cass, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Firstly, tell me about Glenn. What kind of person was he?
Oh, man, he was funny. He was just this very humble, goofy guy. And he was very, very well known for his laugh and just the way he would just kind of crack up at the simplest things. And I actually was chatting to my mother-in-law the other day and I said to her, I was like, you know what? Our son Franklin, I'm like, he's starting to get that goofy laugh like Glenn. And it just really hit me when I'm just like, oh, okay, that laugh is being continued.
That's gorgeous. And how old is Franklin now? I know we'll talk more about him in a minute.
Yeah, so Frankie's 10 now.
My goodness. Well, look, let's go back to Glenn. How did you two meet and what drew you to each other?
We actually met on Facebook. It was one of those things that, back when Facebook first started and you would just add anyone and everyone if you had some sort of connection like school or the location where you lived. And so I had him on Facebook because we went to the same school. He was actually 2 years younger than me, and I had no idea who he was. But we started chatting because he shared something about a band that I really loved. And I was like, yeah, awesome. Saw them last year. They were really great. And then the conversation just kind of went from there. And then he actually said to me, he's like, do you not remember me from school? And I'm like, nah, no idea who you are. And it actually turned out that his best friend, I was actually friends with his sister. And they would actually come and hang out with us at lunchtime.
You didn't make the impression then, clearly.
No, he definitely did not.
But he made it quite a few years later. So what was life like for the two of you, as you obviously got to know each other and became one before everything changed?
So Glenn was a musician. He was a lead guitarist in multiple bands in the like hardcore metal kind of genre, that sort of scene. I was a hairdresser and I owned a hair salon and a couple of other small businesses at the time. So he was focusing on his music career and I was building my businesses, and we were sometimes ships in the night. You know, he's off to a gig, generally Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he was off playing music and I was either working or I was there supporting him at his gigs. So we just had this really busy, bubbly. So Glenn was a musician. He was a lead guitarist in multiple bands in the like hardcore metal kind of genre, that sort of scene. I was a hairdresser and I owned a hair salon and a couple of other small businesses at the time. So he was focusing on his music career and I was building my businesses, and we were sometimes ships in the night. You know, he's off to a gig, generally Thursday, Friday, Saturday. He was off playing music and I was either working or I was there supporting him at his gigs. So we just had this really busy, bubbly, creative life, which was really, really nice. And it's what we both thrived in.
That's beautiful. It sounds like you were both headed in the same direction, but with your own pursuit. So what were you looking forward to in that season of life together?
So we had just gotten married. So 2015, we had gotten married in February. We went on a honeymoon to Hawaii, which was awesome. And then later, I fell pregnant as well, just after we got home from the honeymoon. But what we were mainly focusing on was Glenn's band had actually gone overseas to record their album, and they were getting some really cool opening gigs and talking with potential producers and companies and that kind of thing to really excel and take the band out of Australia, get it overseas. So I had a vision of us living a life on a tour bus.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, I definitely would have been a whole different life for the both of us. But with some of my businesses, I was running them online. So I was just like, you know what, we can do this. We can make it a reality and we can do life from wherever. And I'm a hairdresser, so I'm like, I can get a job anywhere in the world.
That is such a great dream. How far into that dream did you get?
Glenn passed away while he was in Thailand recording the album.
Oh, Cass.
Yeah. I was 30 weeks pregnant with Franklin as well. So we had only been married for a short time. I was wifed and widowed within 9 months.
It's so hard to believe. It really is. And, you know, there's no good or bad way for this to happen, but him being away, what was that like for you when you found out, and obviously being at such a distance?
I think it made it really frustrating on the day that I found out. I had just been diagnosed with gestational diabetes that morning, and so all I wanted to do was talk to my husband. I'm like, answer your damn phone. Like, pick up. But, you know, they had been recording some nights. He'd been over there for about 2 weeks, I think. And some nights they were recording until like 2, 3 a.m.s. And plus Thailand was kind of different time zone. So it wasn't surprising when he wasn't responding to me, you know, first thing in the morning here. But the day kind of just kept going on. And I'm like, I would have heard from him by now. Like, something's just up. And again, I continued on with my day. I started to message some of the other boys in the band and was like, hey, can someone please go and check on Glenn, or can someone fucking wake him up or make him reply to me? Like,
anything.
Getting all like crazy wife. And it wasn't actually until about 9 o'clock that night that I finally got the call, because they had sort of gone, oh, he hasn't come out to eat. That's really odd. Let's go check. And he was just asleep in his bed.
Wow. And so that was how it ended for him?
Yeah. It was just his time. There was no underlying issues. There was no major, you know, cause of death except for he died.
Gosh, Cass, I mean, though that moment, as many of us know, your world just spirals. You're in shock, you're in disbelief, all of those things. What, for you, was the hardest part in those sort of first hours or days?
It was all a blur. You know, my biggest thing was, God, I need a drink. Like, I'm pregnant. I can't have a drink. I can't have, you know, any of my regular crutches that I go to in a stressful situation. But it all really just became a blur. And I often have people sort of ask about like the funeral and things like that. I'm like, I don't even remember it. also think, you got pregnancy brain and all that kind of stuff as well. So we have what we call, as many of your listeners probably have felt, widow brain. So I had widow brain and pregnancy brain all kind of mushing in together, and it was just a complete blur.
How do you process the shock of first losing your husband, but also preparing to become a mother, and pretty soon after? I mean, you said 30 weeks, so you weren't far away.
It's you go into fight mode. You just get it done. You follow the processes, you follow the motions. You kind of go back to like your default method of like, okay, I've got to eat, sleep, repeat.
Yep.
And that's kind of just what got me through those final couple of months. There was just lots of little things as well, like our lease at home was coming to an end a month after he passed. So that all kind of just went into play, and I had friends and family that just sort of took over, and I feel like I blinked and my house was packed up and I was moved into my parents'. So I was very, very grateful for my village that all stepped in and just did what needed to be done without me having to think.
It's amazing, as you say, that village that they're there. They're just there. They do the things that you need, and you can barely put one foot in front of the other, but just get the things that you need to get done in any given day, like you've said. Did grief feel different because you were pregnant, or is it hard to know, having obviously and fortunately not gone through this before?
I think it was I've experienced grief on so many levels, and that's one thing that I use a lot within my own personal practice, but also within my business and what I now do as a profession. Grief isn't just connected to death. And for me, Glenn passed the day that Franklin was born. We found out that my uncle had been found and he'd had a heart attack that day. So in the space of such a short time, we were just dealt so much death. And then over the years, I've experienced grief of like going from maiden to mother and going, well, my life is never going to be the same again because I'm now a mum. I've then had a career-ending motorcycle accident, and that brought up a whole level of grief. So I think the reality is it's just that reminder that grief comes in so many different ways, and it's always different. Like grief for my husband was different to grief for my uncle. And then I carry a version of grief for my son, for the father he'll never meet. It's just such a fabulous kettle of fish.
You speak widely on grief and work in grief. We're going to talk a bit more about that. I just want to know, was there a moment when the reality hit you that you'd lost Glenn and that you were carrying on in this life on your own until of course Franklin arrived?
Not in that moment. It honestly, I don't feel like it hit me. I really don't feel like I fully grieved until Franklin started school.
Wow.
5 years later.
Was that just a case of holding it together somewhat?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was when Frankie started school and he didn't need me as much that I really sort of went, this is actually my life now. This is it. Wow, I miss him. I'm doing this all on my own. And I think I masked as well a lot of it. Frankie ended up he was born 2016. I went back to full-time work and reopened a salon 2017. So I ran from it. And I think that's why it took so long to really fully sit in it and really face what my life was now going to be. And I know that sounds crazy, 5 years, like, wow, but that's truly how it felt for me.
I just, on reflecting on that, if you go back to when you were giving birth without Glenn there, were you in sort of auto mode? Or, what was that like for you? How did you navigate that, the birth and those days?
Yeah, it definitely was. I was just following instructions.
Right.
I was like, okay, I'm just going to do what the doctor says. I remember Franklin ended up being an emergency cesarean, and I'd had like a prenatal appointment the day before, and very grateful because I had lots of businesses in Ipswich. I happened to know a lot of nurses and midwives and doctors in the area. And so I had a prenatal, and the doctor was like, hey, look, if you have to have an emergency cesarean or anything like that, are you okay with that? Let's go through all of that now. So I ended up being induced. So we knew everything was happening, the next day. And so he went through all of the prerequisites and the information, because he's like, I don't want you to have to put up with this in the moment, because there's going to be so many other things happening for you. And so when he came in and he ended up deciding that I was having an emergency cesarean, he just kind of went, yep, okay, prep her for a cesarean, and walked out. And my midwife almost chased this doctor out and was like, that's not protocol. That's not how we tell the patient this information. And she came back and I was like, it's all right. We went through all of this yesterday because he just wanted me to not have to make any choices today. And she was like, oh my God, I was almost going to like write him up.
Cass, there's something though, isn't there, certainly in those early days, where actually just having a set of instructions to follow is exactly what you need?
100%. It's like, I don't have the capacity to think, but I don't want to think, because if you think too much, that's when everything creeps in as well. So being able to, hand over some of the basics and the necessities in the depths and the freshness of grief like that is, probably the easiest way, or one of the main things that helped me get through what I needed to get through.
Yeah, it's actually really good advice, a good tip in those early moments to kind of give that up and go, that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, and I always sort of think, like, when people are like, oh, I've got a friend who's grieving, what can I do? And I'm like, don't ask them, can I bring you food? Don't ask them, can I do this? Just go do it. And when you get there, gauge. If they don't want you to hang around, don't hang around. But don't say, oh, do you need anything? Just have a think of what they might need and take it. If they don't need 7 casseroles, that's totally fine. But at least they've got 7 casseroles to choose from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned before, sort of those first few years of Franklin's life and kind of just getting through it. So until you could sort of take some time for yourself. Were there, though, moments of joy mixed with the grief during that time?
Oh, so much. And that's been such a hard lesson to learn, is the fact that joy and grief can coexist.
Mm-hmm.
And it slaps you in the face every time. But, I'm 10 years in now, and it's been it's an ongoing practice. It's ongoing lessons when you live with grief. But the biggest thing, when you finally accept the fact that joy and grief can coexist, it does help it a little bit more.
Was that something you came to yourself, or has that been part of, the daily practice and the work that you now do that has sort of helped you come to that realisation?
When I started working in the space of gratitude, so when I started actually looking into gratitude practices and understanding what gratitude was, I'm like, yeah, cool. I say thank you to the person who makes my coffee. That's gratitude. No, when I actually started doing my regular gratitude practices and realizing that I actually can be grateful and I can love and I can have joy and I can have all this, and it doesn't mean I don't miss him any less. That's when it all really sort of anchored in for me. So when I started going on a little bit more of a holistic and spiritual journey personally, then things, started to sort of sink in and make sense.
I'd like to talk about that spiritual journey. I'm sure it's something that many have done, and I certainly did myself. But what was it that you did, spiritually to try and, I guess, make sense of all of this?
Well, for me, when we found out my uncle had passed, my dad had to go down to Adelaide and clean out his house. And my dad rang me and he's like, oh, hey, Uncle Dougie's house is full of all these rocks and shit that you have. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, sparkly rocks. I'm like, crystals? And then he's like, yeah. And he's got boxes and boxes of those smelly sticks and those cards that have got like, you know, swords and towers and stuff on them. I'm like, tarot cards, Dad. So my dad basically just rang me and said, hey, your uncle has a house full of crystals and woo-woo stuff, which we were all shocked because my uncle was a principal of like a all-boys Catholic school.
Oh, wow.
So we're just like,
unexpected.
Like, we knew he was quirky. Like, he was definitely, you know, fun. But I was just like, how did we not know this? Like, how did I not know that my uncle was into, you know, the woo-woo, as I call it? Dad ended up bringing all of that stuff home for me. And I just started sort of picking it up and going through it. And I'm like, I know what these crystals are. I know what to do with them. I know how to use these oracle cards. Like, it was just a knowing. So then I pushed myself into studying a bit more of those kind of modalities like oracle card readings, crystal healings. I then also had a conversation with a family friend who happened to be a medium, and she had connected with Glenn like pretty much straight away. She'd actually known Glenn since he was 5 years old. So I knew her connection was going to be strong and that anything she spoke was truth because she herself was grieving the loss of, you know, a family friend and, you know, a son really that she'd, you know, brought up with her own son. So when she started sort of relaying messages to me and she started to share with me her version of life and death and soul contracts and spiritual experiences, again, it just felt right. It was like I always knew this information, but I'd never come across it before in my life.
Wow. Can I ask you, in all of this, did you connect with Glenn at any point?
I have done. I've had some small connections with him very early on, but I think that a lot of the time I was so numb and so exhausted, I really struggled to connect with him early on. So a lot of his messages came from through other people and through other readings and things like that. But a few years in, I did actually have a connection with him where it was quite visual. I was actually doing a breathwork practice and he came and he said goodbye. And I was like, well, you're already gone, mate. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, I actually really do have to go now. And then that's when I explored a little bit more about soul contracts and, you know, reincarnation and that kind of thing.
Wow. I just got shivers listening to that. Can you explain what a soul contract is for those who don't know?
So there's lots of different ways that sort of people will create a belief around it. And there's lots of different stories and versions on what a soul contract is. But for me, it's simply put, you know, when you come down into earth, the soul comes into the human. The human has a list of things that it's going to do within its lifetime. There's going to be experiences that it has to have. It might have experiences that soul has had before and it wants to repeat and have like a little bit of a do-over, or it might be completely new experiences. So like a soul might come back as a woman in one life, might come back as a man in another, might come back as an animal in another. So the souls are designed to come and have several experiences. I like to say to gain data, to have that human experience and to learn. And essentially the contract has a time frame on it. You're here for a certain period of time, and when you leave, the way that you leave might also be part of your experience. It might be through illness, it might be through an accident, it might be at the hands of yourself, or it might be at the hands of another, or it might just be because your time is up. And that's where I fell on my acceptance with Glenn, is the fact that his time was just up. And that's why he simply just went to sleep. There was no outside sources other than, you know, universal spiritual experiences that took him from this earth.
Cass, many of us would have gone down this this path, just, searching for something, for connection, for answers, for anything. But, most of the time we leave it there and eventually, rebuild. But you've taken this on as part of you and part of healing, not just yourself but others. What was the difference for you that made you want to make this part of your ongoing career?
I think for me, I realized that I actually was kind of already doing this healing journey or this helping journey as a hairdresser. I was already helping people change the way they felt about themselves, change the way that they lived their lives. But my tools at the time happened to be, a hairdryer and scissors.
Mm-hmm.
So then my experience with losing Glenn then changed my tools. I was already that nurturer and that helper and that provider, and now it was just a different skill set. So I really made some massive changes in my life after Glenn passed, as most people do. But I realized that I could have made these changes. I could have been living more, living happier, all of these things prior to Glenn's passing. I thought our life was pretty great, but there was definitely things that could have changed within me personally, within our, our financial dynamics, those kind of things. And it was only because of Glenn's passing that I realized, the time is now. Don't wait for a tragedy. Don't wait for a big moment to go, oh, shit, I should probably change my life, or I should probably change what I'm doing, should probably change how I'm treating my body, all of these things. You can make those changes and those choices at any time.
What are some of the main changes you've made for yourself so that you are who you are today?
Oh, I'm not a cranky bitch. Quite as much. I was such a victim. Everything that went wrong was somebody else's fault. It was not my own. I was just, victim mentality, excuse queen, which is kind of interesting because some people are like, oh, we didn't see that. You were so driven and you did so many things. I was like, yeah, but you weren't the voices in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, it's more connection to my body and understanding that I can ask it questions and it will give me the answers rather than just saying yes to everything because somebody else wants me there. So people pleasing was out the window. That was one of the first things. I was like, I'm not doing this life for anyone else but me. Then gratitude, that was one of the biggest things. Being able to just sit and go, holy shit, my life is so full of richness. I am so successful. I am so proud of where I am. And that might just be me hanging out my washing.
Yeah.
So the living for now, realizing, you are not promised any amount of time on this earth.
Yeah. And as you said, you've been through a number of very challenging situations, the loss of Glenn, the loss of your uncle, and also that accident that you mentioned. Tell me how that affected you and changed you.
The motorcycle accident was huge, and it was a completely different version of grief because it ended my career. So for over half my life at the time, I'd done nothing but hairdressing. I'd owned hair salons, hair products, makeup companies. All of these things was all based around the hair and beauty industry that required me the use of my arms and hands. And so the car ran a stop sign, and so I had to slam on my brakes on my bike, and I ended up sliding into the back of the car, and it left me with a fractured shoulder socket, and so I had to have a stabilization surgery. So my career as a hairdresser ended then.
Wow.
And then it was the loss of the use of my body just physically. As a woman, I had a 2-year-old at the time. I couldn't shower. I couldn't go to the bathroom on my own because of my shoulder. It was so many things. And I feel like it just really brought up all of the other little things as well. We know in this, life with grief that sometimes one little thing can happen and it snowballs, and then all of a sudden you're thinking about your loved one and you're like, what? Where did that come from? So my whole recovery was just such a very heavy time. I then ended up with an addiction to the painkillers because it was the only thing that either numbed all of the grief or made me feel something other than grief.
Let's talk about grief, and you've touched on it a few times already, but that learning to live with it, almost embrace it. How did that happen?
I think you just kind of have to, don't you? It's not going anywhere. You don't really have a choice.
But I think we think that we'll have it, we'll deal with it, and then it'll be, we'll move somewhere else and it won't be with us. But that's not true, as we'll know, and as you rightly point out. So how do you coexist with it?
Yeah, and for me, I felt like the learnings about grief really came through my spiritual studies. So learning about crystals, learning about the body, understanding about energy, and understanding about our emotions. So when I started to study and work with understanding your emotions and frequencies, that really taught me a lot about grief and where it sits and what you need to do to move through it. So from a frequency and energy point of view, grief is a very low vibration. And so if you want to not feel grief, you can't just go, oh, I'm going to go from grief to neutral or grief to joy. You can't just automatically skip from level 1 to level 27. You have to go through all of the levels. Whether you stop at them or not, you still have to go through the levels until you get to the next one. So learning about our emotions and frequencies really taught me that, okay, I'm feeling grief today. What do I need to do to get to just neutral to survive? Well, I've got to go through the space of anger and be like, okay, cool. What is the anger that might have triggered this grief? Then what is the, resentment that might be sitting around that anger? And they might only be small things, or they might be really big things and it takes you a couple of days to unpack, or it might just be a brief moment of like, okay, grief was triggered by this thing that made me angry and I'm super tired and depleted, so that's why it came up. And then you just work out how to get through each level to then go, okay, well, I'm at neutral now. I can get on with my day.
Do you think that we're, I guess, afraid of grief and not having it sit there beside all the other emotions that we have?
Oh, 100%, because people are just like, we've got 3 emotions: sad, angry, and happy. And there's not. There's like 82 emotions or something, 80-something emotions that we actually experience. And we get we get taught to not feel them, not acknowledge them. You can't be too happy, stop being sad, and, oh, you're being angry, that's bad.
Yeah. You mentioned in an article that I read that there's no moving on. There's only learning to live with it. And I always had a saying, moving sideways, almost like I was, jumped to another set of train tracks. So I didn't want to have that, leave behind all the great stuff with my husband and my life sort of before he passed away. Is that the meaning in what you're saying there, or is it something different?
Yeah, I think it is something that you always travel along with. It's not gone. It's not, like you said, I don't like to leave it behind. It's not in the past because it is still with you. It's just the way that you travel with it is different, like using that analogy of being on a train track. It's like sometimes you might get on that train and you've got a lot of, baggage to take with you. Sometimes you might just be getting on that train and today's just a carry-on day. So it's just preparing yourself that you can't pre-plan it. You can't book ahead for the extra luggage, but you just have to be prepared that if it comes up, okay, cool. Why am I carrying this? Do I actually need to carry it all of the way, or can I just sit with it for a little bit now and then go on with it?
So what would you say to someone about grief, about what it is and how to manage it, I suppose?
How to manage it. Feel it. That's the biggest thing. When it comes up, feel it. But learn about your emotions. Learn about your emotions and where they sit in your body. For me, grief comes up in my neck and shoulders and in my throat a lot. Whereas like anger is more down in my gut and in my hips. So learning where these emotions sit in your body really helps for when they hit, you can go, okay, where am I actually feeling this today? And I'm like, okay, well, if it's in my neck and my shoulders, I know that it's something grief related. If it's in my lower body and my hips, I'm like, no, I'm angry. Okay, so what am I angry about? And it might be the fact that we're running late or, Franklin's done something or made a mess. But then if it's grief, it's like, okay, cool. So then I'll just question myself, okay, what grief is this? Because I've got an array. So it's like, is this my own grief about my body and my career? Or is this grief connected to Glenn? I generally, when it, seems pretty simple, but when it's more in my chest and in my heart, I know that that's actually grief related for Franklin and Glenn. Yeah. And that's just come with mapping it. So when it hits, I connect with my body and just say, where is this in my body? And your body will show you with a tingle or a throb or some sort of a movement. And then that's where that emotion is currently sitting. It either lives in that part of your body or it's stuck in that part of your body.
That goes back to what you were saying in terms of really understanding your body and knowing what it's doing at any given time. I want to come back to Franklin, and you are now 10 years on. So when you talk about grief, does he have grief for the father that he never got to meet? And how do you make sure that Glenn is present in his life?
Yeah, definitely. There's moments where I will just catch him and he's just doing something and he'll, have a tear in his eye or he'll just be sad. And I'm like, oh, mate, what's going on? He's like, I really miss Daddy. And I really struggled with that at the start because I'm like, how can you miss someone you've never met? I'm like, I don't understand. How can you miss? And obviously I didn't say that to him, but in my own head, I'm just like, I don't get it. But then again, it's coming back to say, no, this is grief, because he's grieving the life that he thinks he should have had.
Yeah.
He's grieving the life that, other people have around him. But then he's also grieving not having a full understanding and a feeling of the love that I show and share from Glenn. So he knows that there was love. He knows that Glenn loves him and all of that. But then he's grieving the fact that he didn't actually get to physically experience it himself in this lifetime.
Yeah, that's big, isn't it?
Yeah. So for us, Glenn's everywhere. There's photos. Frankie's got his guitars in his room. I'm very, very grateful and very honoured that we have a really strong relationship with Glenn's family as well. So like Glenn is just everywhere all the time within our lives and our conversation.
That's awesome. And how has grief shaped, I guess, your new career, your future, and also being a mother? How has it perhaps changed the way that you might have approached it had you not gone through this?
Definitely understanding my emotions, emotional intelligence. It's changed that completely. Love my parents, but I look at them in the way that they manage their emotions, even just my parents' generation. Like I look at how people in that generation manage their emotions and things like that. And I'm just like, holy shit, I would not have the knowledge that I have now. I would not have even bothered to look into this or to understand it if I hadn't experienced grief the way that I did.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very individual thing, but it's certainly a different time, and we're a different generation.
It's made me a better person, which is odd to think and say, but I really do feel that experiencing this grief has made me a better person.
It's interesting you say that. I've actually said in the past I'm happier than I've ever been before, and I find it really hard to say because if it had not been for this awful thing,
Yeah.
But that's also being brave and really being in tune with yourself and like you said earlier, all the things that you have become and the things that you might have changed or done differently that have brought you to this point. So I guess it's an honest admission, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. And I always really like to preface the fact that I'm 10 years in.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't 6 months after. Like, I am 10 years into this journey. And I'm still learning, but what it changed for me was the fact that I was willing and open to learn. It changed the way that I look at the world, that I look at myself, the way that I look at people around me. But I made a choice to change with it. And there are a lot of people out there who don't.
And with all of that learning, how has your relationship with Glenn changed over time?
I miss him, and I miss the opportunity to have been this person in our relationship. Even though I'm like, well, if this hadn't happened, I wouldn't be this person. But I was just like, man, I really wish that I could have been this woman and been with him in this moment. So, and then that's a part of grief too, you know, grief comes up in ways of, you don't just grieve the past, you grieve what you might have had. So for me, yeah, I really wish that I could have, you know, given him different versions of me, or, you know, had the different strengths that I have now when I was back then, and would have been able to support him or support our relationship differently. But he's always there. He will always be part of my strength. He will always be, you know, part of my world. And he will always still get the blame every time our child does something wrong.
The convenient. Excellent. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it. Cass, as we know, you support other people navigating grief now. Obviously, you have a wealth of experience to draw on for that career. What is it that most people need to work through when you sit down with them?
Processing and understanding that grief starts low and we can't go high. So it's really letting people see the levels. Like we know, and people often talk about the 5 stages of grief and all that, but they're not linear and they come and go. Just because you did stage 3 doesn't mean that you don't come back to stage 3 at some point. Like there's no rules of grief, but a lot of the time people are coming to me and they're like, oh, I'm pretty sure it's grief. I'm like, yeah, it is. But there's also anger with it. There's sadness that you're not letting yourself feel. There's vulnerability that you're not opening up to. Like, so it's breaking it down into the bite-sized chunks rather than, oh, I'm grieving.
And is helping others still helping you as far as, you know, that we're all a work in progress?
Oh, so much so. Like, sometimes there's a session and I was just like, oh, I think that message was a little bit for me as well. And then when my clients come back and they're like, hey, I did this, or I've learned this, or hey, I took what you said, but then I did my own thing over here, or I did a little bit of research, or I practiced this slightly differently and this was the result. And I'm like, wow, never thought about doing it that way before, or never looked at it from that direction. So awesome. We can always learn from everyone, no matter what the scenario is. And we can always also learn from our own mistakes.
Yes, a beautiful way to wrap that part of the conversation. Now, look, I ask every guest these 3 questions, so I will, of course, ask you too. But firstly, what do you like to do to remember Glenn?
We have his music. So Glenn's band has a couple of videos on YouTube and his music's on Spotify. So we will listen to his music, but we will always celebrate his birthdays and anniversaries and that kind of thing. Caramel tart was his go-to. So you always know if there's a caramel tart in my fridge, there's obviously an anniversary or a date around, because if I leave a caramel tart in my fridge, I will just devour it myself.
What's something that you say to someone who is newly widowed?
It fucking sucks. It's generally how I open with it. I hate the like, oh, I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
I just will actually acknowledge and be like, this is shit.
Too true. Too true. And finally, Cass, is there a quote that resonates with you most at this point in your journey?
Oh, my followers and everything are so sick of hearing this because I say it almost every day, but what you aren't changing, you are choosing.
Wow, that's powerful. That's really powerful. How do you put that into practice for you?
If I'm sitting here and I'm whinging about something, or if I'm uncomfortable or something doesn't feel right, I have the ability to change it. You know, it's like, for example, I've been really frustrated with my office lately because it's been getting so hot in Queensland. The winter sun direction has changed and I'm sitting here and I'm just getting frustrated. I'm like, I can't see my computer screen. The sun's on my screen for like half the day. I moved my office around. Like, nice. I've got free will. Nothing's bolted down. I can make the choice to change. So it's the simplicity of things like that. You know, if you're cracking the shits because something isn't working in the house or, you know, something's in the way, move it.
Yeah. It's about taking back the power and being empowered
Exactly
to do
right.
stuff. Take back the control.
Yeah.
Cass, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you, and I could keep going for hours. I did, though, before we wrap, just wanted to ask you, you are rather prolific on social media for anyone who would like to follow you. So where's the best place to find you and your musings?
Instagram is where I hang out the most. That's my playground there. So, yeah, Instagram is where you'll find me.
Well, Cass Barrie, thank you so much. It's been a treat.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a great chat.
Thank you to all my guests for sharing their stories so generously. The Widow Diaries is hosted and produced by me, Caroline Winter from Pod Talk for First Light Widowed Support, which provides information, resources and connection for young widowed people throughout Australia. Follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and you can also find out more information at firstlight.org.au. This podcast acknowledges and celebrates the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which stories have been told for thousands of years and on which this podcast is recorded.